conspiracy. You're going to find out a few things you did not know, a few things you need to know, and a few things you wish you didn't have to think about on Dreamland today. The $1 Trillion Conspiracy is Jim Marrs's breakthrough book filled with insights about how our world really works against us. The $1 Trillion Conspiracy. Welcome to the show, Jim Marrs.
Howdy, Whitley. And of course, all the stalwart Dreamland folks, they pretty much already know me and they've already heard me talk, and so we'll just move on. This is an extension of everything else, moves it right up in the modern day, and shows us, number one, that the economic crisis that we're in right now didn't just happen. This is working a plan that was laid down decades, if not centuries ago, and it really covers a whole lot more than just the economic situation.
It certainly does.
In my book, The $1 Trillion Conspiracy, which I had not heard from anybody, so I went ahead and took a couple of weeks vacation, and I was on vacation just a week or two after the book came out, and when I got an email from my publisher, and they said, hey, it's already on the New York Times bestseller list, so I was very gratified with that. But it covers not only the financial meltdown, but more importantly, who caused it, and also spreads out into bad food and water, Codex Alimentarius, biological weapons, drugging the public, the swine flu hoax. Remember that, folks? Last year we were all scared to death. We were all going to die from the swine flu. Whatever happened to that? Dumbed down education, total media control, and the new police state. And while I'm at it on media control, it's absolutely amazing. But for the first time in my experience, I actually was blatantly censored by the publisher. And when I say that, I mean they said, you will take this out or we will not publish this book. And what was the biggest section that they wanted to censor? My section on how the corporate mass media censors the news. So I said, well, you kind of proved my point, didn't you? And so that got censored out. The fact that 2 million people marched on Washington on September the 12th, 2009 to oppose the socialist programs of Obama and his health care and the war in Iraq and everything else, that was hardly mentioned in the media. And when they did, they said, well, hundreds of thousands. They did totally downplayed. And yet compare that to the Million Man March, a few years back. It also covered the linked directorship between corporate America and the media, which is now falling into the hands of only 5 corporations. The other thing they took out was how we have been given a false picture of Al-Qaeda, far from being a global, well-organized, well-heeled terrorist organization. According to a former leader of the House of Commons, Robin Cook, Al-Qaeda, which means the base, simply refers to the CIA's Arab mercenary database. In other words, they can just go in there and grab anybody and tell them to do anything. It also covered the top 25 censored stories of 2009, and I was forced to take out a bit that ties Obama early on to the CIA. He was a creation, probably through Operation Chaos, the same operation of the CIA using students for their spying operations that involved Bill Clinton. So
that's right. I was just going to say, I recall that involved Bill Clinton also. Could you explain exactly what that was?
Yes. Prior to Watergate, the biggest scandal going on in the United States was the fact that it was being revealed that the CIA had used students and student organizations as cover for sending people out around the world and doing their spying for them. And of course, generally people thought this was horrendous because students shouldn't be involved in things like that. And besides that, it really put a freeze on student exchange programs. Well, I got onto this back when Bill Clinton was first nominated and was elected president. I thought to myself, I said, well, this is really strange. I said, how in the world are those old cigar chomping generals in the Pentagon and those intelligence chiefs at Langley, how are they going to sit back and let this long-haired, pot-smoking, anti-war student be president of the United States? So I started digging in, and I found out that Bill Clinton, of course, who had risen from obscurity in Arkansas to become a Rhodes Scholar and then you put on an easy path towards the White House, had actually been reporting back to Cord Meyer's CIA office in London while he was traveling to Europe and even on to Moscow as an anti-war student, smoking dope. Of course, according to him, he'd never inhaled. That bothered me right there. With, you know,
at least Bill Clinton has a sense of humor.
Joint. What's wrong with him, you know?
Right. But at least Bill Clinton has a sense of humor.
Yeah. So, and so that, then I began to look at Barack Obama, and we see the same footprints. His mother was working for an aid institution for the Ford Foundation, a notorious CIA front, and working under the father of Timothy Geithner, who is now our Treasury Secretary, appointed by Barack Obama. And then, of course, we have his obscure birthplace. He still has not produced his legitimate long-form birth certificate, nor his school records, although, of course, when a Freedom of Information suit forced Occidental College to release some records of his, we found out he was there on a scholarship as an Indonesian student of Indonesian citizenship. And so it just all becomes very murky, and now that explains why so many of these documents are now still classified, because they point to a CIA connection, and this was all known as Operation Chaos.
We're in a situation right now where we got into a war in Iraq under false pretenses. We were taken there unnecessarily. We are going to lose our whole position in the Middle East because of this. The Middle East is sinking into chaos. We have a situation where 7 days from now, in case you don't know, Iraq is going to be placing the nuclear, the uranium, enriched uranium, into the reactor it possesses that is capable of producing atomic weapons. Once that reactor goes live, it cannot safely be destroyed without causing a massive radiation spill that could conceivably poison most of the Middle East. So the time when military action can be taken against Iraq is just about over. We are therefore going to be in the following situation. Iraq, a country run by mad people and incompetent people. North Korea, a country run by the actively, clinically insane. Pakistan, a country in terrible chaos, both culturally and environmentally. India, a country with a wildfire, unspoken wildfire of change coming up from below in the form of a Maoist revolution. And Israel, a hyper-terrified country that realizes that one single nuclear strike on Tel Aviv could end its existence, all with atomic weapons. And in the United States, we have a situation where secrecy has not just grown but gone completely out of control, with over 500 secret agencies, CIA, NSA. Forget it. That's old news. We don't even know the names of most of these things. Jim, somebody is trying to bring about and induce the destruction of mankind and the end of the world. It's that simple. Tell us who, tell us why.
Okay. First, let's go back to the George Herbert Walker Bush administration from 89 to 93. And we find that every member of his cabinet, in other words, the people really advising, the people really running the show, with the exception of Vice President Dan Quayle, who you might recall could not spell potato, and his old buddy, Secretary of State Jim Baker, every other member of his cabinet was Council on Foreign Relations, that secretive elite group of Wall Street connected people who basically meet and don't tell anybody what they talk about. They are conspicuously left out of the news unless they come forward and make some official pronouncement, and they're always there. In fact, I might point out that on the day of 9/11, it was all Council on Foreign Relations members, Henry Kissinger, Wesley Clark, Maxwell Taylor, all like that, who were all over the TV saying the exact same script. This is a new kind of war. We must bind the nations together. We must cooperate. We must form together in the United Nations. In fact, the whole stated purpose of the creation of the Council on Foreign Relations back in the early 1920s was to condition the American people to accept a global governance. So during the Bush administration, Bush 1, every member of his cabinet except for those two were Council on Foreign Relations. But then we get a change. We get the Clinton administration, a Democratic administration from 93 to 2000. Every member of his cabinet except for Secretary of Defense William Perry was Council on Foreign Relations. But then in the selection of 2000, we get the George W. Bush Republican administration. Check it out. Dick Cheney, Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice, Donald Rumsfeld, Robert Gates, Elaine Chao, Christie. All Council on Foreign Relations. But then in 2008, whoopee, we got change you can believe in. We got Barack Hussein Obama, and yet let's look at his cabinet. Oops, there's Robert Gates is still there, but now he's Secretary of Defense. Janet Napolitano, Bill Richardson, Susan Rice, James Earl Jones, Timothy Geithner, Larry Summers, Paul Volcker. Whoops, all Council on Foreign Relations. So what I'm telling you and your listeners, Whitley, is there is no two-party system in this country. Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, those are just there to keep us divided, conflicted, and confused. There's only one party, the rich party, the party of Wall Street, and they've been in control all along, and these are the people who are bringing us down.
But,
Why?
Jim, if they want to stay rich, bringing us down is the last thing they should do.
No, it's the very thing they have to do because
Explain.
Their plan, okay, well, let's go back and I'll refer you to a British Fabian socialist named Eric Arthur Blair.
Okay, before we go back and listen to this, that is going to explain a lot, because I know who he's talking about. We're having a little break. We'll be right back.
This is Whitley Strieber's Dreamland. We go deeper.
We're back talking with Jim Marrs. Subscribers, he's going to get into it with Peter Levendo, one of the most extraordinary commentators in this, researchers in this whole field. Between the two of them, they're probably the best there is. So don't miss Peter Levendo and Jim Marrs in the subscriber section. Jim, when we left the air, you were just about to take us to the reason that the rich need all of this chaos in order to keep wealthy.
Right. They need to destroy the United States of America. And here's why. You go back to 1948, and we look at a British Fabian socialist named Eric Arthur Blair, who was well connected to the British aristocracy and the royals, and undoubtedly knew what the game plan was. So he wrote a book in that year and transposed the numbers, and of course that was the famous 1984. And he wrote under the byline George Orwell. And the basic premise of 1984 was that the elitists had divided the world, the entire world, into three economic blocks. And in the book, there's Oceania, Asiana, East Asiana. And then they play one block off against another continually to keep up the tension necessary for maximum profits and control. Now, that's the game plan, folks. And in the real world today, we have the European Union, and they're trying to form the North American Union. And then it would be easy enough to create the Asian Union, because most Asian countries are already pyramid power schemes, and all they have to do is bring the top leaders either onto their board of directors or buy them up, and then they'll have an Asian Union. The biggest stumbling block to this whole plan is the United States of America. Why? Because we have a tradition of individual freedom and liberty, and we have the legal basis for that freedom and liberty in the form of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And thirdly, we have guns. So they have got to destroy the United States of America, militarily, politically, socially, culturally, and unfortunately, they're doing a pretty good job, primarily because they have total control over the mass media. That's why you never hear a politician refer to the republic anymore. They can only talk about democracy. Got to save democracy. Got to go protect democracy. Bring democracy to other countries. Well, what is democracy? Democracy is mob rule. It's ruled by the majority. Excuse me. The classic example of democracy in action is a lynch mob. Well, this is not what we were given. This is not what we want. We were given a democratic republic, which means we have a system of law and checks and balances so that before you can hang anyone, they have to be given a fair trial. And they have the right to legal representation, the right to confront their accusers, the right to confront the evidence against them. And then if they're found guilty, then you can lynch them. Okay? And yet we are now moving pell-mell into a totalitarian, almost a police state. And because people are being fearful, they're being blindsided
right.
in every direction.
We're terrified because of, well, every time you take an airplane flight, you're reminded of the danger. Or is it really a danger? Is it simply there to frighten us?
Exactly. And it all boils down to 9/11, doesn't it, Whitley?
That's right. It does.
Okay?
That's when it all started.
That's right. Now, let's consider that, of course, I've written a book on the Terra conspiracy that clearly shows that 9/11 is simply the story we've gotten is not true, and that there's something else going on. At very best, there were people within the government who knew this was going to happen and allowed it to happen. But let me...
Jim, just let me say this. There were people who knew what was going to happen. I know it for certain, and I know it for two reasons. First of all, one of my cousins was in a hotel in Boston before it happened, the night before it happened. At 4 o'clock in the morning, the FBI turned out the entire hotel. Everyone had to stand on the street with no explanation. They searched the entire building, and then they left. 911 happened a few hours later. They knew something, or they wouldn't have been doing that. The other thing is that I was trading the S&P futures at the time. I'm doing it as a sideline to make a little extra money. And the week before, I had noticed short interest, which is interest that expects a fall in the price of the S&P, was rising dramatically. And I couldn't figure out why. So I had gone out of the market because whenever I had a situation in a market like that, a single trader without much access to any secrets, you're going to sit on the sidelines when you see something you don't understand. Now, that short interest had no reason to be there that I could tell economically. It was just there. Then 911 happened, and someone must have made billions of dollars. They knew beforehand. They had to.
That's true. And in fact, the listeners may recall that in the days just following 9/11, that story actually made the mainstream media, and they were talking about this short selling of stock in American United Airlines. And they said, we're going to get the FBI on this, and we're going to track this to see if it doesn't track to Osama bin Laden. And folks, you never heard another word about it, did you? You know why? Because it didn't track to Osama bin Laden. It tracked to people who are connected to our CIA. Now,
that's absolutely correct. That did come out in the news, but in a very small way.
Very small way. Now, anyone listening who says, "Oh, well, now wait a minute, you're just fantasizing and you're just trying to draw some wild speculation here," and after all, we've had a government investigation. Let me point to you the words of John Farmer, Senior Counsel to the National Commission on Terrorist Attacks upon the United States, better known as the 9/11 Commission. This is the official commission that was set up by George W. Bush to tell us what really happened on 9/11. And here's what he has written in his book, Ground Truth. Quote, "In the course of our investigation into the national response to the attacks, the 9/11 Commission staff discovered that the official version of what had occurred, that is, what government military officials had told Congress, the Commission, the media, and the public about who knew what when, was almost entirely and inexplicably untrue." End quote. And then later he says, at some level of government, at some point in time, there was an agreement not to tell the truth about what had happened. My God, folks, if the head lawyer of the 9/11 Commission says what we've been told is untrue, then what's unpatriotic about trying to find out the truth of the cause of the death of 3,000 Americans? And the
cause of the death of American society, because that's what's happened. We're lost here. I mean, remember how dissatisfied everyone was with George W. Bush. His approval ratings were through the floor. Now we get a guy on the opposite side, and everybody is equally dissatisfied because there's no actual difference between them. Yeah,
there's none.
Bush was against socialism, and Obama is in favor of socialism, so-called. But
Bush said he was opposed to socialism, and yet everything he did, from No Child Left Behind, it was socialist programs, gathering more power of the government.
Said, or more accurately, Dick Cheney said, government debt doesn't matter, as they put us into massive debt. Where are the war bonds of the past? Where are the war savings accounts? Why are we fighting these wars on debt instead of paying for them? The reason is they're not just wars. They're not wars that can help the American people in any way whatsoever, and they know very well if we were asked to pay for them, we wouldn't do it.
That's right. But since when do we ever get a chance for input? There was massive opposition to the Obama health care plan, even from people who had originally supported him because they were looking for a single-payer system, and Obama quickly said, no, we're not even going to consider that. And so even they were against it, and yet they passed it anyway. And then we get House Speaker Nancy Pelosi who says, well, we must pass this bill so we can find out what's in it. And is that not the most ludicrous, insane thing you've ever heard?
Well, how would you like to be on Medicare? I'm just gone on Medicare, and now I face a situation where either I am going to see my health care continuously eroded because of the new health care system, which it does not favor the welfare of seniors at all, or we're going to get a Republican plan that basically throws out the baby with the bathwater, ends Medicare, gives me a bunch of vouchers, and essentially says, go die. That's where we are.
Yeah, and Whitley, you and I we're above the age line, you know.
It's fantastic to me that any senior would support either party. But they do. I mean, most of them are Republicans, and I find that difficult to believe.
Now you just hit the nail on the head, because I'm sure a lot of people are scratching their heads and going, yeah, but what do we do about this? Okay, folks, we have a golden opportunity this year in November, okay? You go down to the polls and you figure out which one of the people on the election list there are your incumbent senators and representatives, and then you vote them all out. Everyone out.
I don't agree with you at all. Here we're going to get a bunch of Tea Party lunatics. I mean, these are people completely incapable of running a country. We have a big, complicated, difficult situation here
We need people who are capable of responding to the real needs of the American people, which is to say,
true, Whitley,
but we're not going to get them. I mean,
I've
read the platforms of these candidates, and they're nut jobs, every one of them.
Well, I'm not talking about voting for the Tea Party people. I'm just simply saying vote the incumbents out. That will send an indelible message that we're not going to put up with this anymore.
Well, I don't agree with you because I think the incumbents may be poison, but they're not as bad poison as some of the people that would replace them.
Well, otherwise, you should look. Let's face it. It's
who are we going to get here in California? Carly Fiorina, whose success in life was outsourcing thousands upon thousands of American jobs to Asia. She's supposed to go to the Senate and be our representative. I'm sorry, I don't think so.
That's not any better, but it's the old line about if God had intended for us to vote, he would have given us candidates, okay? And this
we don't have any guy. Excuse me for cursing, folks, but the fact is we don't have any good candidates anywhere on the horizon.
Why is that, Whitley? It's because the people in office are either bought and paid for by corporate power, or they're intimidated by blackmail or hidden terror. Okay? If you get somebody who tries to do right, John F. Kennedy Jr. tries to enter politics, Paul Wellstone opposes the war in Iraq, their plane goes down. They crash into a tree. They die. And this is Nazi tactics. This is the way that the German Nazis did it, and this is the way that the National Socialists in America are doing it. If they can't buy you or blackmail you, they kill you. And anyone in the know realizes this, and that's why we have no viable candidates. We're not supposed to have professional politicians. We're supposed to have successful men and women who devote a few years of their life to public service and go to Washington, try to see that there's laws passed to the benefit of all the people of this country, and then come back and resume their private lives. Instead, we get tools that go up there, put in there by corporate money, listen only to the lobbyists, and then get on the federal employee retirement system and have a cushy job for the rest of their life, and they don't care what happens to us.
What happens to us? But, I've got a grandchild. I care a lot what happens to us. I have, and I see our country as turning into a third world country or worse. And God, if these drug gangs get out of control and get up into Arizona and California, I thank heavens that Arnold Schwarzenegger recently called out the National Guard to help protect the southern border in California, because we have all these politically correct people. I just don't get it. How can you be politically correct when they're coming across the border with AK-47s and boxes of methamphetamines? I'm sorry, I don't understand that.
Well, that's, again...
No racial profiling. Oh, we don't do that. So let's search the car of this little old lady from Dubuque over here while we let these limos full of mysterious people with the cars just about to touch the ground, they're so heavy, through. I don't think so.
Well, that's all part of the New World Order plan. This is why, in a way, they stubbed their toe with the war on terrorism, because on the one hand, we're supposed to believe that there's this terrible terrorist organization out there trying to slip weapons of mass destruction into our country, and yet on the other hand, to this very day, they've not done one substantial thing to secure the borders of this country.
No, they haven't. Listen, and when I worked on my book, Critical Mass, I found that out. Listen, we got to take a break. We'll be back in a few minutes. This is Whitley Strieber. We're getting steamed up today with Jim Marrs, his book, The $1 Trillion Conspiracy, How the New World Order, Man-Made Diseases, and Zombie Banks are destroying America. Should that be are destroying or have destroyed America? I am not a liberal. I am not a conservative. I am not a Republican. I am not a Democrat. What I am, I'm an American. I want my country to survive, and I don't see anyone on any horizon, any ideology or party that I just named who has that as their central interest. We sit here in a country that is mostly governed by secrecy with a gigantic unknown secret budget of unparalleled proportions. Afghanistan and Iraq, most of our military there are gone, and instead mercenaries have taken their place who are not accountable to we the people, and we don't even get told when they get killed. We have no idea what's happening to these people, what their safety level is, anything at all. They are simply out there to be forgotten. They are literally cannon fodder. And in the meantime, we bleed an unending level of tension, ending up fighting wars without end, bleeding our country white. They are strangling us. Vampires? You like vampire stories? Open the Book of Washington. That's the Book of Vampires. Jim, welcome back.
Right, and you're absolutely right. There are more private contractors operating on behalf of the United States in Iraq than there are our troops, and it's just warfare by proxy. And why isn't anybody do about this? Because all the best and brightest that go into the military, like you said, they're cannon fodder. And if they're not killed or wounded or messed up over there, then they come back with psychological problems. At the first of this year, the first couple of months, January, February, the largest cause of casualty in the U.S. military was suicide. Now, this is some messed up people, and that's what happens when you go send them into a horrible combat situation with no clear end in sight, no clear goal in sight, and no clear reason for even doing that. It started off, it was Saddam Hussein was about to build an atomic bomb. Well, that proved wrong. Okay, and then it was, he's got weapons of mass destruction. Well, that proved wrong. And then it was, we're over there, we got to get control over the oil. Well, you go back and find out we were only counting on about 16% of our imported oil from Iraq, so that's not true. All right, so then where are we now? Well, we got to bring freedom and democracy to Iraq. Well, then, if you'll recall, here a couple of years ago, when the private mercenary group, Blackwater, sprayed a whole crowd in a square and killed 24 people and wounded 40 more or so. And the government of Iraq, who, let's face it, is our little puppet government, they finally sucked it up and they said, we want them out. And the United States said, oh, no, you can't do that. We have contracts with them. And they're still there. Okay? Of course, they changed their name now. Now it's XE. But they're still there. Now, how's that for freedom and democracy? They can't even get these mercenaries out of their country because we are the power there. It's an occupation, clear and simple, and with no end in sight, and now no reason really for us to be there other than to maintain control over their mineral resources. This is neo-colonialism at its worst. And yet nobody can even say that because then they say, well, you're against our troops. No, I'm not against our troops. I served in the U.S. Army, have an honorable discharge. I was proud to serve, and I honor anyone who goes to serve in the armed forces of this country. But that's what makes me so irate, is that they are being wasted, okay, in this non-necessary war. And the thing that's really scary, and Whitley, you touched on this, is that at a time when natural disasters and the influx of armed invaders across our southern border, this is when we really need the National Guard here to do what their primary purpose is, to safeguard the borders and the integrity of the United States, and yet they're not even here. They're off over there in Afghanistan, Iraq. And again, I submit, nobody could argue that that's the fact. But I submit that I'm telling you this is part of the plan. Now, you just hide and watch until at some point there's going to be something really terrible happening, a war in the Middle East, the Gulf oil disaster will flare up, or some hurricane or some other natural calamity. And the next thing you know, we're going to have foreign troops in the United States, not as invaders, but as United Nations peacekeeping forces. And they will be coming into your town and city saying, okay, line up, get your chips so you can get your food and water. And if you haven't got a decent place to stay, well, we have a FEMA camp just waiting for you.
Well, anything like that could happen at this point. I don't think these people that run this thing will stop at anything. I am obviously, folks, not very well satisfied politically, and I don't think many of you are either. We have come to the point where we do not have a party worth supporting. There isn't one. We have a Republican Party, which is about delivering us lock, stock, and barrel to the big companies when this is a nation of small business people. They want to choke the small businessman out of business, leave him starving, and force us all into gigantic companies where a few people rule our lives. And, you know, I don't fault the people who work for big companies. It's all fine and good. But what they want to do, what they want to transform this country into is unacceptable. I do not intend to become another China. And then you have on the other side of the coin the Democrats who are so, I can't even describe how contrary and wrong-headed I think they are. I
know, and the thing is, Whitley, how did we get like this? Isn't there any smart people left? Well, then you have to
not in politics.
Well, hardly anywhere.
You know
what I bring out in my book, The $1 Trillion Conspiracy, is that they have got this whole population dumbed down through a dumbed down education system and drugged out. Okay?
Well, they are dumbed down and drugged out.
I'm not talking about illegal drugs. I'm talking about all these people on these antidepressants and all kinds of drugs.
Ritalin and all that stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Everybody's like that.
Now consider this, okay? Look at this little revolving door. All through the Bush W administration, Dr. Julie Geberding was director of the Centers for Disease Control, leading the charge that we got to have vaccines. You got to be vaccinated against swine flu, bird flu, Asian flu. And the first batch didn't work so good, so you're going to need to go back and get a second shot. Okay, and as soon as the Bush administration left office, Dr. Geberding resigned to become president of Merck Pharmaceuticals Vaccine Division. Now, I'm sorry, this is, whether in actuality or not, that is such a clear vision of conflict of interest.
Something's not right there.
That should not be a lick.
Something's not right there, but that crosses the whole spectrum in the federal government.
Exactly.
People who are in regulation retire into cushy jobs in the companies that they were there to regulate, meaning that they could not have made those companies angry or upset them or given them a difficult time. Otherwise, why would they be rewarded with a fine job and a comfortable future? The reason is the whole regulatory system is a corrupt failure, and we pay the price in the form of children who are not as fully developed as they should be, lives that are shortened, and the pack of lies that consists of, Jim, I'm getting so mad, I have to just calm down. Folks, you better read The $1 Trillion Conspiracy. I have to tell you, this book, yeah, you're going to be hot under the collar, but for crying out loud, don't take any antidepressants or tranquilizers while you're reading it.
That's right. When what you're just describing, Whitley, is the merging and blending of corporate power with state power. And that, my friends, is the dictionary definition of fascism.
That's what Hitler did.
Exactly. And the thing is, everybody has been taught that Hitler and his Nazis were violently opposed to the communists, which is true, except you look closer. Communism was just an extreme form of Marxist socialism, and Hitler's Nazis was, by their own name, National Socialist. So socialism's the name of the game. The money powers of the world did not want communism spreading all over the world. They wanted to be able to have socialism, national socialism. You got socialism in this country and that country, so they can keep playing the countries off against each other. And so now the difference between modern America and Nazi Germany was that in the 1930s, the German state under Hitler gained control over the corporations, and it was that merging of state and corporate power that was fascism. In modern America, the corporations have gained control over the state, but the end result's the same. And let me tell you how bad it is, folks. These folks at the top, it's not that they just want power and wealth and control. They want to kill you, okay? Prince Philip, who is, high up on the international globalist hierarchy, is quoted as saying human population growth is probably the single most long-term threat to survival. If it isn't controlled voluntarily, it'll be controlled involuntarily by an increase in disease, starvation, and war. Well, I ask you, isn't that what we got going on right now? And for those who would try to apologize and rationalize and say, well, Prince Philip, he was just simply trying to say the results if we don't voluntarily watch population control, I would point to you that at a later date he said, quote, in the event that I am reincarnated, I would like to return as a deadly virus in order to contribute something to solve overpopulation. Folks, they not only want your freedom, they want your lives. And it is incumbent upon you to wake up and start defending yourself, or you're going to find yourself in a real world of problem.
Well, we're already in a world of hurt. Right now, as we are talking, there are approximately 400 million people on planet Earth in trouble because of environmental problems in their areas. In Russia, in Pakistan, in India, in China, in Europe. That many. The ones that aren't being flooded out are being suffocated in unbelievable heat. And that is...
By the way, Whitley, are you aware that in Russia, a leading Russian scientist, in an article published by the state-owned major media, so in other words, this isn't just some fringe conspiracy theorist, they are accusing the United States of using weather-altering technology such as the HARP array to stall the upper air currents and cause those very environmental disasters and problems that you're talking about.
Well, we don't want to get in a weather war with the Russians, but who knows what might have happened. I have to say that natural forces that exist out there right now make all of this look very inevitable. I don't think it took any intervention by any system like that. I have to tell you. There was just an article, I think, that they're working on an unknown country now, if it hasn't already been published by now, that saying that the whole superstorm concept that Art and I pioneered is vindicated. Vindicated. It is true. And we can see all over the planet the very kind of deterioration that we warned about back in 1999 and were laughed off the world stage for having done so.
Right. And it's absolutely true. And they whether or not they are modifying the weather, and I can assure you, if they're not actually doing it, they're trying to do it, because I was writing articles about the military's weather modification programs back in the 70s. And so you can imagine how far they've progressed today. But whether or not that's the case, that the New World Order people will use every disaster that comes along to further their agenda of globalization and taking over as a totalitarian state, gathering their power. And part of the problem is, and you're part of the solution, Whitley, you and many others who have independent voices who are able to be heard, but unfortunately the mass of people listen to CNN or Fox or, they watch TV, and they are wrapped up in an electronic matrix that presents them with a false view of the world, and this is the problem.
Right.
I mean, most people, I think, are decent people, and they would make a decent decision on any matter if they were given the full facts, but they're not given the full facts.
All right, we've come to the end of our time together on Dreamland. If you want the facts, couldn't be easier. Get the $1 Trillion Conspiracy, Jim Marrs's new book. It's got the facts in it. Yes, it will make you hot under the collar, but yes, it will also educate you. And we need education in order to understand. Most of your friends are just as passive as they can be. They think that they're getting the truth out of Fox or CNN or NBC or somewhere. Clue them into the fact that that ain't the truth. We don't have political parties. That's an illusion. What we have is an enormous hidden entity, the purpose of which and the nature of which we do not know, but it runs your life and mine in every single terrifying detail. Thank you for being with us, Jim Marrs, and subscribers, don't miss Jim and Peter Levenda. And if you're not a subscriber, what are you waiting for? This can't go on like this forever. What if this dies? Then what? Where are you going to go? There's hardly any voices like this out there. We're literally crying in the wilderness. Wake up, America. This is about patriotism at its most fundamental level. We gotta get some new brooms who aren't crazy people, and that means we need to go out and find a whole new way of doing this. Okay, enough said. Subscribers, listen to Peter, listen to Jim.
Langley, how are they going to sit back and let this long-haired, pot-smoking, anti-war student be president of the United States? So I started digging in, and I found out that Bill Clinton, of course, who had risen from obscurity in Arkansas to become a Rhodes Scholar and then you put on an easy path towards the White House, had actually been reporting back to Cord Meyer's CIA office in London while he was traveling to Europe and even on to Moscow as an anti-war student, smoking dope. Of course, according to him, he'd never inhaled. That bothered me right there. What the hell? You don't even know how to smoke a joint. What's wrong with him,
Right, but at least Bill Clinton has a sense of humor.
Yeah. So, and so that, then I began to look at Barack Obama, and we see the same footprints. His mother was working for an aid institution for the Ford Foundation, a notorious CIA front, and working under the father of Timothy Geithner, who is now our Treasury Secretary appointed by Barack Obama. And then, of course, we have his obscure birthplace. He still has not produced his... I said, well, you kind of proved my point, didn't you? And what was... so that got censored out. The fact that 2 million people marched on Washington on September the 12th, 2009 to oppose the socialist programs of Obama and his health care and the war in Iraq and everything else, that was hardly mentioned in the media. And when they did, they said, well, hundreds of thousands. They did totally downplayed. And yet compare that to the Million Man March, a few years back. It also covered the link directorship between corporate America and the media, which is now falling into the hands of only 5 corporations. The other thing they took out was how we have been given a false picture of Al-Qaeda, far from being a global, well-organized, well-heeled terrorist organization. According to a former leader of the House of Commons, Robin Cook, Al-Qaeda, which means the base, simply refers to the CIA's Arab mercenary database. In other words, they can just go in there and grab anybody and tell them to do anything. It also covered the top 25 censored stories.
Conspiracy. You're going to find out a few things you did not know, a few things you need to know, and a few things you wish you didn't have to think about on Dreamland today. The $1 Trillion Conspiracy is Jim Marrs's breakthrough book filled with insights about how our world really works against us. The $1 Trillion Conspiracy. Welcome to the show, Jim Mars.
Howdy, Whitley. And of course, all the stalwart Dreamland folks, they pretty much already know me and they've already heard me talk, and so we'll just move on. This is an extension of everything else, moves it right up in the modern day, and shows us, number one, that the economic crisis that we're in right now didn't just happen. This is working a plan that was laid down decades, if not centuries ago, and it really covers a whole lot more than just the economic situation.
It certainly does.
In my book, The $1 Trillion Conspiracy, which I had not heard from anybody, so I went ahead and took a couple of weeks vacation, and I was on vacation just a week or two after the book came out, and when I got an email from my publisher, and they said, hey, it's already on the New York Times bestseller list, so I was very gratified with that. But it covers not only the financial meltdown, but more importantly, who caused it, and also spreads out into bad food and water, Codex Alimentarius, biological weapons, drugging the public, the swine flu hoax. Remember that, folks? Last year we were all scared to death. We were all going to die from the swine flu. Whatever happened to that? Dumbed down education, total media control, and the new police state. And while I'm at it on media control, it's absolutely amazing. But for the first time in my experience, I actually was blatantly censored by the publisher. And when I say that, I mean they said, you will take this out or we will not publish this book. And what was the biggest section that they wanted to censor? My section on how the corporate mass media censors the news. So, 2009, and I was forced to take out a bit that ties Obama early on to the CIA. He was a creation, probably through Operation Chaos, the same operation of the CIA using students for their spying operations that involved Bill Clinton. So
that's right. I was just going to say, I recall that involved Bill Clinton also. Could you explain exactly what that was?
Yes. Prior to Watergate, the biggest scandal going on in the United States was the fact that it was being revealed that the CIA had used students and student organizations as cover for sending people out around the world and doing their spying for them. And, of course, generally people thought this was horrendous because students shouldn't be involved in things like that. And besides that, it really put a freeze on student exchange programs. Well, I got onto this back when Bill Clinton was first nominated and was elected president. I thought to myself, I said, well, this is really strange. I said, how in the world are those old cigar chomping generals in the Pentagon and those intelligence chiefs